Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, Superpower and Sidekick. I'm Kim Ang.
And I'm Cinda Kay. And we come together every week to team up with spirit in order to live a life beyond our imagination.
All right, so we were talking offline about what were we talking about?
We were talking about shadow work and how we didn't get it in school, but my daughter had some relationship classes in her high school. And some of the information that she came home with helped us to understand some patterns that were in our family dynamic that were toxic and really help us to address them in new ways. You know, we have been in a patriarchal, unbalanced, unequal society for a very long time, and a lot of codependent, toxic relationship dynamics have occurred from that, and they're deeply ingrained in everybody. There's nobody that's not in hard, unless maybe they're in the Amazon and they've never seen outside society. But anyone that is present in society, some of these things are so ingrained that it's really hard to come to the consciousness and to be able to see it, because when ingrained brainwashing is going on, it's just reality to the person that is going through it. They do not realize that they have the power to change that reality. So bringing the topic of shadow work as a form of transformation, so that way we can create space in our life for more esoteric type messages and things like that, because we're so caught up in today's world and doing the things that we're supposed to do and everything being perfect, and we have to produce in order to be worthy individuals, that we have left zero space for spirit to enter.
Yeah, and a lot of that shadow work has to do with setting boundaries. I feel like that's so important, and a lot of us don't understand boundaries, how to set them. And I'm reading this book about boundaries. I forget what her name is, but she talks a lot about like even children need to have boundaries and we have to allow them to have boundaries, because you know how like they would say, "Oh, why don't you go hug so and so?" um, and they may not like this person, or this person feels unsafe to them, and so when we say, "Oh, just go hug them," because they're your friend, and so that's kind of a kid's way of saying, "Hey, I'm not comfortable, so why don't you respect my wishes instead of imposing it on them?"
Also, we're growing as a society and realizing that that is actually grooming for future abuse. These are lines that were purposely blurred at the time that they were blurred. So it's really finally recognizing that forcing a child to hug Uncle Henry, who's very creepy, is actually grooming. And that we do not know how to tell people no, because if you tell someone no, you're not a nice, kind person. These these were actually purposely blurred so women, or it can be men too. I don't mean that it's only women, but it is for the predator to be able to get its prey. That is why that is in our society in the first place.
Right, because it seems like the example you gave about the priests, right? They are members, they are the clergy, so have a certain
Standard.
standing in society. So we're told that we should trust them, right? And so like Uncle Henry may not be a very nice person behind the scenes, but in front of everybody else, he's a good, upstanding member of society. So when the kid says, "No, I don't want to go and hug Uncle Henry," and there's a reason why I don't want to hug Uncle Henry, we should, listen to them.
Absolutely, we should. And I think we need to quit treating our children as they are lesser than us, because I know that every one of my children actually came in probably more intelligent than I am. And we can't assume just because they're inexperienced that they're stupid. And we shouldn't be treating children as stupid, period. We need to be listening to them as humans. One of the things my daughter reads back to me now is, Mom, you always talked to me like I was a human being. You never changed it to try to, I never felt like you talked down to me or emphasized me, that I spoke to her, because she felt that through some other relatives and other people that she knew, she would feel like an infant when they talked to her because they would talk down to her and not even know it. But she was so aware, she felt it. She'd know it right away.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that kids do absorb a lot, even if you don't think they're paying attention. They hear all of our conversations and they're processing it, but maybe they're, not processing it in the adult way that we want them to. But
Sometimes more adult than we are, because I think some of our society's stuff is actually keeps us unresponsible and like children, or not children, selfish adults. I've never seen children that are just naturally selfish. Like I see some, and whenever I talk to people, it's one thing to be childlike. It's a whole nother thing to be childish. And I think we need to use different words, because that's not fair to the children. Adults that are doing that, it has nothing, they're just being toxic. They're not being childlike
right, exactly.
or childish, excuse me. But, you know, our perception is really askewed. And because a lot of us are here, I think, to help change the dynamic of our society currently, we might feel more uncomfortable in those toxic dynamics than somebody else might, because it's in our DNA to come here and change it. And that's another thing I wanted to mention. When we talk to our children and we talk to them like they're not smart, intelligent humans, I've had enough evidence of past lives that I am 100% sure that a lot of children come in with a lot of knowledge. And the more that we allow them to share and show it, the more it'll be there for us too.
Right. Just like that saying when, a kid is so adult-like, you think, "Oh yeah, this kid has an old soul," which is probably true.
And unfortunately, sometimes that child is put into adult situations that and had to learn to be an adult way before it's time too. I didn't realize one of the signs of me whenever I was being abused as a child is I looked like an adult as a kid. And I find it now to be a sign of abuse. In many, the child isn't allowed to just be a child at that point. but my kids, every one of them are so different, and I wanted to take credit or blame for any good or bad, and then I started seeing, wait a minute, they're all so different. Even if I parented them exactly the same, they still came out totally different people, so it's not all on me.
Well, amongst siblings too. I mean, you came from the same parent, but you all have different personalities and
I'm here to
understanding.
do different things.
Yeah.
In my conversation with Spirit this week about what to put out, and are we just going to do shadow work to nauseum, it was, until there is space for Spirit to enter, keep talking about shadow work. And that we are so accustomed to doing things the way that we are trained from birth to do them. How are we ever going to do something new unless we create space for a new idea to come in? And a lot of what we're doing was, a lot of the brainwashing and conditioning was actually made for the perpetrator, for to victimize us so they can get money, so they can get fear, so they can have control, whatever these things are. So this work is probably the biggest work we can do on the planet right now, is to really sit down and know our shadow, because that is what they control us through. Um, you know, for instance, asking for, well, one of the stories that came to my mind is just something kind of silly and stupid, but my daughter, we'd moved into a new house, and my daughter had misplaced her little video game. And I had searched and I'd searched high and low, and I'd searched, and we could not find it anywhere. Well, I kept getting this message that I needed to clean out the videotape drawer. And we still had a VCR back then. I'm telling myself, this a while back. And and I did not want to clean that out. I did not have space to clean that out right now. Why did they keep telling me to clean that out? And it probably took me 6 months before I listened to the urge to clean it out. And I went and I did, and there was my daughter's video game. Second, I opened the drawer. And I had been asking, and they had been giving me the answer the entire time. How often does that happen in our own lives? That's why space is needed, why we really have to back up. And this brain that is so hyperstimulated, and those of us who've been in trauma, it's also very hyperactive and very hyper vigilant. All of these kinds of things, but all of that puts barriers in for the messaging to come in. So rather than allowing the inner critic to just go on uncensored, which is what is happening today outside. Everyone I talk to, they get out the hammer and beat the shit out of themselves daily. It's a daily thing. I don't know. There's very few friends I have that I know who speak to their inner being in a nice, loving, kind way. So the more that we sit down and really take that itty bitty shitty committee out from between our ears and set it on the table so we can see it rather than it just running on nonstop. And the thing is, what we don't realize, we get behind it and we support it and help it, and just give it more ammunition to bid up more, that there is no room for growth, for spirit to come in and give us new ideas and new ways to do things. We're praying for a new society, but then we fill the space and there's no room for new society. So it's really about, when you have that thought, rather than just allowing it, take it out. Look at it. Why do I view myself that way? Does that come from me, or is that from some commercial I watched, or my really hypercritical aunt when I was 3? Where did it come through at? And really start finding the source of it. And then when it comes in, go, you know, I hear you, thought. I saw you there. I do not have to follow you, though. This is where my free will and choice comes in. And the thing about thoughts is I can put a bigger one over you. So rather than allowing that thought to just run away and have all of your energy, use that same energy to pull something out of the hat that you want to feel, that you want to invoke. Because what people are not realizing is all of these thoughts invoke a frequency. So when you're angry at yourself and you think you're a piece of shit and you're unworthy and you should be ashamed of yourself and you're guilty for everything, because let's face it, that's the message from everywhere these days. If you do not take the time to separate yourself from that, it will rule your life. And those are the frequencies that you're putting out into the universe all the time. And that is not prosperity. That is not happiness. That is not joy. That is no way to create your hologram life the way that you want it. Because the the issue is we're all living in a hologram. But because we are co-creators, it's like, oh, well, you don't have a different reality than I do. We both see the sky as that blue and the sun is that yellow. But in actuality, we are in a shared hologram that we can change.
Yeah, that's why doing shadow work, if each of us are doing our own shadow work, then we will automatically raise the vibration of the collective.
It is the reprogramming. We are the reprogrammers of the matrix. And as each one of us takes that time to reprogram their own brain, their own thought processes, that gets uploaded into the whole. That was another thing whenever I was really meditating this week. When I first learned UE, universal energy, with you, we studied energy healing for many years. um, I could feel the third eye activation. I had no doubt it was real. And but my first inclination was, oh my gosh, we really are connected. This is no lie. This is no joke. And I became hyper aware of my own trauma because I very much so did not want to upload that into the whole. I didn't want anyone else to ever have to feel what I went through. So there was something that very, and I'm talking the very first day, I knew my biggest job at that moment was shadow work. Now, there were other students within that they got something else out of it. And from my perspective, because that's all I can say, is they felt elite, that they were a little bit better than everybody else out there. And basically that their shit didn't stink and they didn't have to do any work. And I say this because I had one of each in my household. And it was really easy to see the difference. And now, 25 years later, it's become very, very clear that the shadow work is the number one thing. If we are wanting to create a new society, if we want to become the multidimensional beings that we are, that they purposely separated us from, and come back into nature, that the first thing that we have to deal is with the programming and reprogram our mind so that way we can accept that new information coming in.
Yeah, because I feel like that is so important because if you are not dealing with your shadow, it's going to keep coming up and up and up until you deal with it.
And the other thing is too, though, it's going to keep coming up even if you deal with it.
True.
But it's up to us how much of a nightmare we're living when it comes up.
Yeah, because then once you figure it out, then you can have a new perspective, a new way of dealing with it, right? And that's the
Exactly.
point.
Last week I was having a lot of issues and I was really emotional. I didn't realize I had an old trigger just kind of subtly getting me every day. And it was just this little tiny trigger. And it exploded. But whenever I did see it, it touched everything and went click, 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 click all the way through. And all the answers just came flooding in. And I realized it was a lot like searching for my daughter's DS game. These are questions I've been asking Spirit about. And the things that I was frustrated with was actually the answers coming back to me. And I think what's going to come from it is actually going to clear up a huge pattern that had been in my life for a long time. I, I'm a good mama and I'm going to take care of everybody. And unfortunately, some people might take advantage of that if I don't have proper boundaries. And I saw this week where I needed to put a really big boundary, and some people need to do their own emotional labor. That just because I'm a mom and I will do it does not mean I'm supposed to do it.
Delegate.
Not even delegate at this. This ain't mine.
Well, yeah, I mean, like recognizing that it's not yours and putting it back on the person that it belongs to.
And our conversations already come full circle. And I love it when it does it because we're back to whenever we tell the child to hug Uncle Henry, we're grooming them. These are the kinds of things that created that conditioning that we're having to undo. That we think we have to be open to everybody's problems and be the solver for everybody and everything. And that is not true. That was forced on us, though. So I don't think there's a problem with having a recognition of where that comes from. So that way we're more on, that we realize it when we're being manipulated by somebody to do their labor.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're having an argument with someone and they're gaslighting you or putting that blame on you when really It has nothing to do with you. So that's how, when you clear out your shadows, it helps you to recognize that,
And more
right?
than likely, the person that's gaslighting isn't doing it on purpose. Again, that's their conditioning and how, rather than life skills, that's where their grooming and conditioning comes in rather than a life skill to deal with it. That they don't know, they're in freeze, they're in flight or flight. So they're going to manipulate you to take it over because they're too scared to. I think we all need to be like really, really researching manipulation tactics, because the second that you see a manipulation, the power over you is, it's gone. It works like magic. To me, I mean, I've had a ton of spiritual phenomenon that I love it, but I actually get more satisfaction probably when I get on top of an old habit and able to break it. Whenever I see it and I find that key, I call it the Gordian knot, and I found the right place to pull, and I just keep pulling it until the whole thing comes undone. And that's just it. I've realized now that if I am in a toxic mood, there's some boundary around me getting broke. Not always, not every time, but this last week it was. And I had been so groomed and trained into taking responsibility that was not mine in that situation. I didn't even realize I could stand up and say, no, don't do this. This is not what this, nope. My free will is not in this. And I think as women, men too, because I think that they've been trained in similar ways, but we have to get that. If we don't get anything else intact, we have to get our no intact. A silly thing that happened to me, but I really got to see how groomed and conditioned I am. The last rental we were in, the septic tank went out while we were there and needed to be replaced. I completely took it on that I had wrecked. It was my fault that the septic tank had broken, and I was responsible for it. It took 3 people to sit me down and said, Cinda, that was 100-year-old septic tank. And you had zero to do with it. It just went out while you were at the house. But I am so quick to take on responsibility that I would have taken it all on and thought I was going to have to pay the 10 grand to put a new one in.
That's a big one to take on.
But you don't, when you're so groomed to take on responsibility for others, you don't necessarily see it when you start doing it to yourself. And that's just it. Our itty bitty shitty committee almost always comes from an abuser or someone who didn't have our best interest in our life. And then we take it over and just continue it.
Yeah. That's so hard to undo, though. So hard.
So one of the good ways to sit down and realize where, can you go through and make a list of where you're taking responsibility that's not yours, and find strategies to no longer take those responsibilities on? Because it's not so much just seeing it. You've also got to have a way of saying, nope.
I think that's part of the issue with people who like to please others. People pleasers love to say yes to everything. And so when that moment comes when you're so quick to say yes, maybe pause and and say, should I be doing this? Is this in my best interest?
And I've gotten good with like requests like that. I've actually gotten pretty good with that. It's, but I will assign things erroneously to myself. Because of my conditioning in childhood, I have to really watch it. I had a mommy dearest, narcissistic mom, hypercritical, and I never could. I wanted to do anything to please her because I could never please her, and it created a heck of a people pleaser. And I'm not. I'm mostly not that now. Mostly, but there'll still be those. I also had I had a teenage pregnancy, but I took on the responsibility of it. I didn't shirk that responsibility, but I will take on way more, and the father of that child never took any responsibility. That's what's wrong with our society today. I was watching, I was in a meeting yesterday with a wonderful author, Sarah Gottfried, but she wrote about hormonal health and hormonal cure. Everybody, go get her book. And I think she's got a new one, autoimmune cure. But she was talking about, they're finally starting to study women within the medical. And one of the main things that they're coming up with is that women hold almost 80% more responsibility and stress than men do.
That sounds about right.
And that's the imbalance in the society that I believe a lot of us are here to help to undo and recreate. But in order to do that, we have to quit taking responsibility that's not ours. And I'm speaking to a lot of women out there right now because I am 100% sure I'm not the only one that does it. And how many of us women are hypervigilant and exhausted because of it? And weaponized incompetence is no excuse. You don't know how to do something until you do it. So the next time someone tells you, but I don't know how, it's like, okay, well, then do it and you'll learn. That's literally the only thing to say to, oh, do you need help? I'll show you how. I'm happy to do that. But don't ask me next time to do it. It's time that we start doing that more and more and more and more.
Yeah, or YouTube it.
Or YouTube it.
I love YouTube.
And if your husband does a crappy job at doing dishes, so that way you don't ask him to do it again, make sure he eats off of those plates.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Mike had a story once. It was a guy he worked for, but it was hilarious. But just talking about boundaries, and sometimes people won't listen to us, and it came to my mind, and it's a funny story. Um, One friend of ours, he had a guy that would come over always at dinner time, wanting to eat at dinner. He'd just show up at dinner time. And the guy was like, I did not invite him over to dinner. And it just got annoying after a few weeks. So one day the guy's there for dinner. And whenever the guy with the owner of the home, when he got finished his plate, he just set it down and let the dog lick the plate. Finish as soon as he finished licking the plate, he just went and put it in the top of the cabinet, back on top of the plates. The guy never came back for dinner again.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
And the guy really did wash his plates, but he just did that for that guy. So,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever it takes to get the message across, I personally give you permission to do so. Because some people are so, no, that's your job. You're supposed to do that for me. What do you do with that energy?
But sometimes some people don't take hints very well, so you can be as blunt as you want to be until your point is across to them.
I'm no contact with my mom because of her narcissism, but for a few years, I almost felt guilty in a way over some of it. And it was weird. It was a couple weeks ago. It actually come back to me. I didn't realize I had definitely set a boundary, and it was one she did not like, and that's why she completely cut me off at that point. But when I remembered what boundary I set, I went, I'll go back and set it today. It was that meaningful to me. She had told my daughter that she had bought her a little miniature animal, but it was so precious she couldn't give it to her right now because she's a child and she might hurt it. So don't worry, when she dies, her mama was going to give it to her. And I stopped her in her track and said, I will not do any such thing. I will not take anything after you pass, nor will I give it to any of my children. If you ever buy her anything again, you either give it to her right then or keep your mouth shut.
Well, that's not being blunt at all.
No. And I realized though that I had done it. It was probably the most forceful thing I had ever done with her. But whenever that memory came back, I went, would I do it again today? Absolutely, I would. Because for years, I thought I was not worthy because the minute she bought me a precious toy, she would also buy a very high shelf to put it on so I couldn't reach it. That puts a message in a child's mind.
Wow, she is narcissistic.
She didn't allow me body autonomy. I wasn't allowed to choose the color of clothes I wore, how I wore my makeup. Nothing. I got in trouble for tweezing my eyebrows in my 30s
Wow.
because she wanted me to look like Brooke Shields. Can you think of a more groomed child in our society than Brooke Shields? When I look back and I see, and it's very clear to see what they did to her at a very young age. And she's talked about it now. I watched a special where she talked about it too. And my mom put her up to me as this, that was my goal. That's who I had to be. And I realize, I look back at that now and go, ooh, that's twisted.
Well, and that's the problem with how we grew up too, is we're always being compared to other people's kids. You know, like, why can't you be like so and so?
So,
You
what is
know?
that?
Yeah. So that's a lot of stuff to untangle too.
Well, society is going through change with how we're rearing our kids. But I see some my age people putting, well, back in my day, they beat some asses and kids didn't talk like that. And, one of my friends that does it, I go in and remind him every now and then that he's the one that pointed out to me my mom was abusing me when I was 13. And he was one of the first people that saw it. And he's one of those people that posts that. And I'm like, are you sure? Do you want to rethink that? You know, I don't think that we're supposed to be above our children. I don't think we're any better or any lesser than them. And that's just it. I'm out for more of an, you know, relationships of equality. And that's with men with women, that's adults with children too. Because whenever you start respecting everybody, then you're not going to put a child in a situation that's going to harm them. But we got to get over ourselves in order to do that.
I mean, we just have more life experience than they do, but they understand.
We might have more life experience, but sometimes they can see the solution that we're blind to because of that life. Because even though we have more experience, we also have been much more conditioned. And we don't point out how important it is to undo conditioning if we are spiritually seeking. I don't think that that topic really gets covered enough.
Yeah, I don't think so either. A lot of it is, like you say, spiritual bypassing.
And just slap a positive affirmation on it. Why are you complaining? I had when I was first coming into the spiritual community out of severe trauma, I admit I had some issues with affirmations. They literally kind of made me want to puke.
Oh my God, me too.
Okay, good.
I hate those affirmations.
I'm actually really good with them now. Not on every day, but now I realize that they're actually to help us undo the inner critic. But I can't do it and deny if I'm going through some kind of suffering or, saying a positive affirmation over the top of it just going to make me want to puke. I have to go ahead and be really honest where I am. And once I let that out, then I can let the positive affirmation come in, but not while all that other is on top of it. And I think forcing people into just positive affirmations can actually be a toxic thing all in and of itself, especially someone who's been through trauma. And we've all been through trauma on some level, really. There's some traumatizing things happening in the world currently. Um, so I don't think anyone's necessarily above or beyond it. I think all of us have some level of it, somewhere where we weren't loved, where we needed love at some point in our life. And so the constant, and I do think that we need to attune our antenna towards that positive thinking and towards those positive affirmations. Yes. Do I think that they're the fix all? Oh, hell no. No.
No, it's not, because you're still dealing with your baggage.
I think it made mine go in and seed a little deeper and stew a couple extra years. That if I had been given the space to be who I was and how I felt in that moment, I could have processed all that stuff that my body was carrying and digested it and been able to move on. So we need to create spaces. I have a friend who calls it a brave space rather than a safe space. And I love that concept because as much as you want to be safe for another person, intentions don't always hit the way that you mean them to. Sometimes someone's good intention can hit somebody in a very negatively way. So it's about coming together and being brave and allowing difficult emotions, if they're there, to be there and to allow space for them. So that way the person has support for them to come out and be released and to digest and to move it on. But we can't just slap a positive affirmation on that and tell them to go away. And as much as I like Louise Hayes, I don't love all of her work. And she's the one that kind of started this. And that every illness had some kind of toxic, some kind of emotional toxicity habit behind it. Now, I'm not saying she's wrong, but it really opened up in the spiritual community, everyone pointing to everyone, well, look, you're doing this wrong because you have cancer, or you're doing this wrong because you have this. And in a way, it got weaponized rather than it be the supportive thing that I do believe she meant it to be. I'm happy that our podcast will allow for extreme emotions if they're in the room. And, I want to create a space for people to be where they're at in that moment, because that's the best way to move on and transform into something else the next moment. But if we're not allowed to be who and what we are in that moment, how can we move on into something else? I can't remember the name of it, but I just got on a new Instagram account, and they're actually going through and doing techniques to like release anger. You pinch this and you put fingers here and it releases anger out of the liver, and they're going through and showing all these different kind of body work to help release trapped emotions. It is absolutely true that our limbic system holds on to everything, and if there's repression or suppression of any kind, it lives in our cells. And if you just put a positive affirmation over that, you might as well be just putting everything under the rug. You got to lift the rug up, you got to take it outside, you got to beat it, and you got to clean out everything underneath it in order. So we got to give people place to not be perfect and to feel their feels in society. And one reason I believe it's not equal is because some of us feel more feels than other people. And the people that don't feel those feels put all kinds of judgment and demanded people be more perfection, that perfectionism. Well, more than likely, that person that doesn't feel their feels is actually just disassociated anyway. And right now, the people with disassociation are actually put up, oh, look how emotionally mature this person is. No, they just aren't even, they wouldn't know a feeling if it hit them on the head.
So, do you think that a lot of the emotions that we hang on to, that's why people get sick?
I do think that there's connection to it. I definitely think, the more stress and the more trauma and things that we are carrying in our body, the more chance we're going to have health problems. We know that. But I don't think you can say, oh, well, because you've said this bad thought in your head for 7 years, that's why you have cancer. It doesn't work like that. What about the person? What if they were exposed to a whole bunch of pesticides as a child? Or, there's not a no. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I do think we become more susceptible to illnesses the more that we have not had permission to own and feel our emotions.
But do you think that we have the power to heal ourselves because when we're connected with the higher frequency?
I think our bodies are miracles. And I think if we give it the right environment, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, that it can overcome anything. I do. Now, how to get to that, that's harder. And I hadn't figured all that out. But I think as spiritual, because we are spiritual seekers, I don't think you can just put it all into, oh, I have this emotional problem and now that's why I have this physical problem. I think it's, you know, all three of those pillars is like the milk stool whenever you're milking a cow, and it's got to have the three. If you don't have all three touching the ground, you're going to fall over. So we have to attend to our emotional well-being, to our spiritual well-being, and to our physical well-being. And they all three actually work in much more unison than what we give them credit for. And there's not enough knowledge to work on a lot of the emotional stuff. There's We're talking life skills here that have not been provided. And they do know them now. They do have a lot of clues on this. If you just go through and start researching narcissistic manipulations, you're going to start seeing it around you. You'll see it in advertising. You'll see it in the political world. It, I mean, there's something to becoming educated to manipulation tactics. So that way, not only do we not get caught in manipulative tactics outside, but we start recognizing our own. And especially, a lot of us gaslight ourselves and manipulate the heck out of ourselves.
How do we manipulate ourselves? By believing other people's narrative?
By believing other people's narrative, believing you can't take a day off because you're unworthy if you do. That's a gaslight.
Like when you're sick?
Yeah. That's when I do it my worst. I'm not super nice to myself when I'm sick. And it comes through past abuse, though. I had medical abuse with my mom. But I'm better and better about recognizing it earlier on, so I stop it and it doesn't just continue. And, that's just it. It's habitual. So the first thing to help, I don't like the word fix because I don't think we're supposed to fix ourselves. To become aware is just being aware. When you start seeing yourself doing it and you notice it every time, you're making a change, and you may not realize it, but just by recognizing and becoming aware when we do these things to ourselves, it automatically starts stopping. Intention is literally everything. First thing Michael ever taught me with universal energy was intention is everything. And I've spent the last 25 years explaining to him what that means. Because it's so powerful. And the more of our passion that we put into an intention, the more it can, that's just it. A lot of things that have happened in my life seem like really big, really cool, synchronistic, obviously from spirit, but they came through my own intention. We are so more powerful than what we realize.
Yes, we are. And we have abilities that we're just scratching the surface, I think.
And the one thing that's in our way is the lack of shadow work. And it's not that we have to have our shadows fixed in order to access it. We have to quit being half people. We are only a half a person when we deny our humanity, our nature. When we allow that aspect to come, I just got a clue. Because that's where the gifts are. They're in that. I can feel it all over my body. So as we accept our human, messy, non-perfect aspects to come into wholeness with our being, our gifts come in with them.
Well, because if I mean that seems like a good point, because we are humans and we were given emotions, and so why would you deny certain emotions by sweeping them under the rug?
And what if our superpowers are in those emotions?
Ooh.
Emotions
Let's build on that.
emotions invoke frequency.
Yes.
So when we start learning to direct those emotions to what we want instead of what we don't want, we learn how to harness our passion. In tarot, the chariot card shows a white horse and a black horse pulling a chariot. The point of it is it's not just the light side, but it's the dark side too, and you have to harness both of them in order to move forward. Otherwise, you're just going to chase your tail till the end of eternity. So it doesn't say you turn the darkness into the light. That's not what it's not saying. You have to fix it, you have to make it perfect. That's not what it's saying. It's saying it is half of your power, half of your truth, and you got to have both to move forward. There's a truth about embracing our shadow, and I'm not talking about embracing bad behavior. People twist things up, that we no longer feel guilty and ashamed of our mistakes, that we realize that they are part of who we are, and to deny them, we deny ourselves. And I guarantee you, if you deny your truth day in and day out, all of your emotions are stuck in your limbic system. They are not being utilized. With mediumship and with a lot of the esoteric studies I do, with energy work, the whole point of energy work is an invocation, right? We're invoking a specific frequency. Emotions invoke energy. All of them do. I mean, teaching about prosperity, I talk about Lakshmi. You can speak about Lakshmi and she will fill a room. You'll start, if a lot of people are sitting around talking about her, you can invoke her and you can feel her there with you. For Christianity, you got a room, people talking about Jesus. Jesus is in that room with them. His energy is invoked and it is there. It is called in. That's one reason I was resistant to mediumship, because I don't want to ever invoke a soul that has crossed over. I believe in allowing them the privacy and whatever they need to do on their path, moving forward. But whenever I realized I never had to invoke them, then it was okay. But invocation is a huge part of manifestation. And as we learn to use our emotions for ourselves rather than for what has been going, the manipulation of society that has kind of taken and stolen our power from us, but this is how we bring it back and start using it for ourselves rather than for them. And that I give kudos to anybody who is seeking divinity in their life, or their own. It doesn't have to be divinity. Maybe they're agnostic. Peace in your life and happiness in your life. Whatever it is that helps you to invoke that, I 100% am behind you. And I'm just trying to tell you that what's probably keeping you from it is your own shadow.
That's so true, because if we're so blocked by our shadows, nothing's going to come through.
And what if spirit is giving you your solution, but you don't want to clean out that VCR drawer?
Exactly. They keep talking to you and telling you the answer, and yet you don't listen because your house is so cluttered, nothing can get through.
That's pretty well, and that's why I do study feng shui, because I think it's a huge tool in spirituality. I had an ex-teacher that I was arguing with like crazy in my head, and I thought I had thrown away everything from her courses and I thought it was all gone. Well, my husband had just set it into another location. And one day I went outside and I was frustrated. And I found them. I'm like, what the heck? Why are these still here? I threw these away 3 years ago. And I went and put them in the truck myself, watched him go to the dump, made sure they left. I literally have not argued with her since. So as you're talking about clutter, that's just it. As we clean out our clutter, we can actually clean out our clutter.
Yep, in our homes and in our minds.
And we don't have to keep all the family heirlooms that we were forced to keep. We don't have to.
And you don't have to fill every wall in your house with pictures of yourself.
I think you've been going through that recently.
Yes. Ah. Yeah, my parents got a new place, and I've been trying to make sure that she doesn't decorate. It's like, Mom, I don't think we need any more photos of the family. We know what we look like.
What you do is you give her one designated area and say, Mom, this is where family pictures are allowed. We don't want them everywhere else because even if you want to see us, we don't want to see us.
Yeah, that's what I told her. 'Cause she wanted to. It's like, I know what I look like. I know what my siblings look like. I don't need to walk into the house and see a picture of us.
But that's a perfect example. A lot of the stuff that we're talked to, this is what we were told we have to do from one
Right,
generation to the next, to the next, to the next,
right,
to the next.
right.
And at some point, we got to say, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or else we're going to do the exact same thing they did.
And it's nice to walk into the house when there's like not a lot of stuff on the wall because it feels free, and it's just so
And clean.
freeing. Just, yeah, and clean.
I talk, um, I used to be a computer geek. And one of the things I try to tell people, they would fill up their hard drives and then wonder why their computer was moving so slow. I was like, because you have to walk around all the furniture before you can get to your kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to clear a route to all of the place. First thing you do is clear a route. But people think, oh, well, if there's 200 gig, I can fill up the 200. No, if you completely fill that up, your computer's not going to run anymore. You got to keep some room for things to move around. Same thing in our homes. If you have a hard time sleeping, if you have a lot of arguments in your head, the first thing to do is clean out your nightstand. And it's surprising how well it works. But when you're doing it, also do it with the intention of coming out of argument with myself. I want to overcome my dichotomy. So I'm doing this, and I make cleaning my house almost like a ritual. If I sweep the floors, I sweep it because I am making room for prosperity to enter and things like this.
Hmm.
So combine intention with your housework, and then it becomes ceremony and ritual. And we can all be witches and create magic in the happy way. By the way, I have good connotation of witches. So I have to explain to people, no, they're not evil. That was propaganda.
We all wish we had skills like certain witches.
Absolutely. And the thing is we do. So that's why we're clearing all this out of the way so we can use them.
Yep. Get our superpower back.
Absolutely. Where we don't argue with it and say, no, I don't want to clean out the VCR drawer today. Where we just go, oh, inspired idea. Go do it.
Exactly.
I'm getting much, 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 much better than what I was. And that's just it. We also need to allow ourselves the process and don't expect perfectionism the first day out.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to so many people that are like, oh, I can't meditate because they tried it one time and their brain wouldn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain's never going to stop. I don't care. You could meditate for 30 years and you're still going to deal with the brain.
Yep.
That's why a lot of times I do teach more of an active meditation where you're doing visualizations and things like that because it keeps the monkey mind from just taking off. But there's other things that I do, different kinds of focuses, so that way you kind of dilute the monkey mind. You're not going to get rid of it, but you can absolutely dilute it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying you can get rid of it, but I don't know if that's a complete 100% process. I think it's something that, it's kind of like we got to take out the trash weekly or else we're going to be covered in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ongoing process. It's not something just one and done. It's more like dishes and laundry.
Exactly. It needs constant cleaning, just like our homes.
I'm still trying to we're still not finished completely moving in yet. We moved in and my husband got a really fun job that he just finished last night. So maybe now we can start getting it done. But
Good.
actually, it's enough now. I can say he got to play on a movie set. But I've been having to be patient for him. So now we can finally get it done.
All good things come to those who wait.
I'm not known for my patience. But it's funny because my mission is one of those kind of things. So it has taught me patience.
Yes, it has. Over and over again.
Over and over. You know, we're so used to the quick fixes, that instant gratification, and working with spirit, they've got your best interest and long term at heart. It's not going to just be a quick one and done.
They're setting you up for the long haul.
Yep. But I do think that almost everybody out there is playing really small because of conditioning. And we're at a really cool time in history that if you want to do something big, all you got to do is get the conditioning out of the way to do so.
Yeah, I
You
feel
know,
like that's a big one because all of that is coming right up in the forefront right now in
it really
every
is.
aspect.
It's like in our face right now. We have to deal with it. Our lives are not going to be sustainable anymore unless we deal with it. And, you know, talking about shadow, yes, it might be what you feel guilty about or what you feel shamed about, you know, mistakes and this and that. But conditioning, which was no fault of your own, is also that shadow. And that's where we got to take the blame and shame out of it.
It's a tall order, but we can do it.
But that's why we are dedicating so many episodes to it. When I was meditating to spirit, it's like, yes, there's lots more that can come through, but this is what's needed the most, is that
Mhm.
people do not realize that they cannot accept a new reality because they haven't worked on really knowing their own psyche where it is today.
Yeah, sometimes I'm guilty of saying, "Oh, the good old days, back when we were growing up, so and so," right? But it's like, things have changed and we do have a new way of doing things and we got to think outside the box.
The good old days, there was still a whole lot of little girls that were being conditioned and groomed to accept things and be people pleasers and not have any boundaries to be able to say no. So that way we had an unequal society.
Hmm.
And I'm okay that we're no longer in the good old days.
Yeah,
You know, it's always a matter of perspective.
absolutely.
And I would rather all this stuff be, let's just see it. Let's see what's going on. And you know, I do think we are very much so in the time of revelations, because things that I remember being really upset about when I was little. I could sit in certain conversations, which are people that I now realize were very conservative. Um, but the way that they talked about minorities and other groups, it really disgusted me, and it made me. I don't know. I remember this when I was 6. I remember feeling it. I knew that they were degrading and dehumanizing a whole, you know, people. And now you can see it. It's on the table. It's not just being talked about in the back rooms, and you know, it's being talked about in the open now, and just the way it should be. Because that was part of what was bugging me next last week. So I'm just going to say it so that way it's said. I think we should always be able to clear things. What was really bothering me last year was a lot of the dehumanization. Last week, the dehumanization that I was seeing in media right now, and this fight over the majority rule. And the only reason that white cis male was the majority, white cis Christian male, or any of the three of the patriarchal religions, mm, is because they went around and massacred all the minorities. And now their numbers are back up, and it's no longer okay to go out and massacre them all. So you're just going to have to deal with it. You're no longer the majority, nor will you ever be again.
Yes, and that's a good note to end on.
My spiritual path, that's what it took me to see. And I saw it by traveling all over this country, going to sacred places all over the world. and saw how many Aboriginals were massacred in their own temples. And so whenever I see this fight going on out there, I'm glad that it's finally at the tipping point. It's about time. And more importantly, you know, I do want more restitution for those demographic, you know, for those people, for the natives, for the Aboriginals, and for more people to have a voice in this world.
Yeah.
So I'm all here for the restructure that we are helping to start.
Yes, indeed. All right. So that was a good talk. Thank you for joining us.
And if you would like to add to the conversation, please, I want to make this as interactive as possible. We are going to get into more subjects other than just shadow work, but right now this seems to be the important thing. If
Yeah.
you would like to make a personal appointment with me to work on that, I'm at syndicate.com and all the social medias.
All right. Well, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.
Ciao.